My name is Layla. I'm 32 years old. And last spring, during the kickoff meeting for the biggest project of the year, I was assigned the easy tasks. Not because I was new. Not because I lacked experience. Not because I asked for them. But because, as my manager so casually put it, you're just naturally better at the little details. Translation: you're a woman, stay in the background. Everyone else, especially the guys, got ownership of actual work streams, client deliverables, technical scopes, strategic presentations. Me. Meeting minutes, calendar invites, color-coding spreadsheets and keeping the team on track. The kind of work that doesn't get you promoted, just quietly taken for granted. And the worst part, no one said anything. Not the senior developer I helped troubleshoot during crunch time 2 months ago. Not the product manager who once pulled me aside to ask for my insights privately. Not even the intern I mentored, who now had more say in the project roadmap than I did. I sat there, smiling like it didn't bother me, while my stomach twisted into something cold and familiar. Because this wasn't new. It was just the first time it was delivered with a smile, in a room full of nodding heads, and the illusion that this was just how teams work. But what they didn't know, what he didn't know, was that by giving me the easy tasks, he gave me something else. Total visibility. Because when you control the calendar, the communication, the flow of every update and deadline, you start to see everything. Who's actually working, who's winging it, who's falling behind, and who's bluffing hard to stay ahead. And I made a decision right there, quietly without fanfare. If they weren't going to give me the lead, take it anyway. It wasn't always like this. When I first walked into that office 2 years ago, nervous, wide-eyed, double-checking my blazer for lint, I actually felt excited. It was the kind of company people post about on LinkedIn. Exposed brick walls, cold brew on tap, standing desk, all the hallmarks of we're not like other workplaces. And I wanted so badly to believe that. I remember the HR welcome packet said, "We rise by lifting others." I highlighted it like a nerd in yellow. Because I was ready to rise, and ready to lift too. The first day, I was introduced around the floor. Most of the guys offered quick nods, distracted half-smiles, already mid-Slack message. The women, polite, warm. But their eyes flicked with something behind them. Tiredness, maybe. I didn't notice it at the time. What I did notice was how I was introduced. "This is Layla, she's coming in with a strong ops background, super organized." Never mind that I had led 2 system overhauls in my last job. Never mind that I was certified in Agile project management. They saw the word organized and ran with it like it was my entire personality. And I went along with it. First, because I thought if I just delivered, if I was helpful, competent, always one step ahead, they'd see me. But in that environment, being competent doesn't make you visible. Being loud does. And being loud in that office came easy if you were a guy with opinions and a vague familiarity with buzzwords. I wasn't loud. I was accurate. I was thoughtful. But as the months went on, I started to notice something. The women, especially the new ones, got asked to help out, plan the team events, take notes, proofread slides. The men got asked to lead. And I told myself, that's fine. I'll just outwork them. I didn't realize yet that no amount of helpful would break the system built to overlook me. Not until that project meeting, where the glass finally cracked. Started small. So small I almost didn't notice it. My very first cross-functional meeting. A conference room with 6 people, 2 laptops, and 1 projector that never worked the first try. We were there to kick off a vendor integration. Nothing revolutionary but important. I had read the scope document twice, made notes, even prepared a few questions in case they asked for ideas. They didn't. 5 minutes in, our team lead, Mark, glanced around and said, "Layla, do you mind taking notes?" I hesitated just long enough for it to register. But I smiled. But sure. Opened a fresh Google Doc and started typing. In that moment I told myself it was fine. Normal. Someone has to do it. What I didn't realize was that smile cost me something. Because the second I agreed, it became my role. Not just for that meeting, but every meeting after. After a few weeks, people stopped even asking. They'd just glance at me, and I'd already have the doc open. Some even said things like, "We know Layla's got it covered. She's our note-taking ninja." They said it like a compliment. And I swallowed it like a vitamin I didn't want to take, because it was supposed to be good for me, right? But behind that praise was a message. Your support staff. You're the secretary in the room, not the strategist. Meanwhile, Jacob, the guy who joined the same week as me, was asked to drive next steps. Even when he had nothing to say. Even when his action items were things I'd drafted for him the day before. He was still seen as the forward motion. I was just the document trail. And when I finally mustered the courage to suggest an idea in one of those meetings, Mark nodded vaguely. Then asked Jacob what he thought. That's when I realized. It's not that they thought I wasn't capable. It's that they already decided who they wanted in charge. And I wasn't on the list. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. First, I thought it was just in meetings. The note-taking, the follow-ups, "Can you just send out a quick summary, Layla?" But then it started to show up everywhere. Jacob got pulled into a client call to represent the team. Even though he didn't understand the platform integrations and I'd literally built the documentation. He's just good in front of people, they said. I watched Emma, one of the sharpest engineers I'd ever worked with, get sidelined during sprint planning. Her suggestions were met with awkward silences. 10 minutes later, Ryan repeated her point louder. And everyone nodded like he'd just cracked the Da Vinci Code. The office happy hours. The Slack jokes. The bonding over fantasy leagues and crypto memes. It was a club. And we weren't in it. But the thing about this kind of bias is, it doesn't always look like hostility. It looks like casual familiarity. It's the manager who laughs at Jake's sarcasm but tells me I should work on sounding less intense. It's the way Derek's half-finished wireframe gets praised as visionary, while my polished proposal is called detail-heavy. It's not no. It's not yet. Maybe next quarter. We just don't see you in that role, right now. They never said I couldn't lead. They just never saw me when I did. And when I brought it up, once gently to Mark, he smiled and said, "You're doing great. People just trust you with the behind-the-scenes stuff. You're the glue, Layla." Glue. Sticky. Silent. Holding it all together. While everyone else builds the structure. That night I stared at my laptop for hours. My inbox was filled with praise. But not one message invited me to step forward. Only to stay reliable. Dependable. Invisible. I didn't come in swinging. I didn't accuse anyone of sexism or storm into HR. I tried the reasonable route. The way women are trained to speak up in systems that never asked for their voices to begin with. One Thursday morning, after wrapping up a particularly rough sprint planning session, where my ideas were ignored, then regurgitated by someone else, I sent Mark a quick message. "Hey, can we grab 10 minutes later? I'd love to talk through some feedback." He replied instantly. "Of course. Always happy to support." I remember feeling hopeful. Like maybe, just maybe, the culture wasn't intentional. Like maybe he just hadn't noticed. So we met. I sat across from him, laid out my thoughts calmly. That I was eager to contribute more. That I'd love a shot at owning a feature stream. That I noticed my strategic input was often redirected or brushed aside in favor of easier work. And he smiled, wide, professional, like a seasoned HR handbook had trained him. "Layla, I hear you. Really. You're doing incredible work. I just think you thrive in structure. And honestly, leadership needs people who can keep things grounded." Grounded. There it was again. Not incapable. Not junior. Just too stable to grow. I asked him directly, "Is there a reason I'm not being offered any ownership, while newer hires already are?" He chuckled, light and dismissive. "Don't take it personally. You're just naturally organized. It's not a bad thing. Some people are meant to lead from behind." Meant to. Like it was fate. Like my skill set was a ceiling I should be grateful for. He nodded. Smiled. Said thanks for the clarity. But inside, I wasn't thanking him. I was updating my notes. Because if no one was going to give me permission, I'd give it to myself. They were always kind in private. The senior product manager, Carla, once caught me in the kitchen after a launch and said, Layla, honestly, we'd be buried under a pile of chaos if it weren't for you. You've got real leadership instincts. Smiled. Said thank you. But inside I wanted to ask, then why don't you say that in the meetings? Why is it always in the hallway, the stairwell, the inbox subject line that ends in, just between us? Even Jacob, the guy who always got the high visibility tasks, pulled me aside one day and said, Hey, I used your checklist from last quarter. It's gold. You should seriously publish this internally or something. I asked if he'd be willing to back that in our next team retro. He laughed, awkward, dodging. I'll see. Don't want it to look like I'm not doing my own stuff, you know. Course. It's okay to benefit from my work. Just not okay to give me credit for it. They like me safe. They like me quietly impressive. Useful but not disruptive. Effective but not memorable. Because the moment someone says out loud, she should be leading that, it forces them to examine why she isn't. And that discomfort, they avoided it like fire. So instead I became the workplace paradox. Respected but not recognized. Valued but not visible. People trusted me with their messes, but not their meetings. They leaned on me when things fell apart, then forgot to mention my name in the summary slide. And I realized, respect in private means nothing if it doesn't show up when it counts. I didn't need another compliment in the hallway. I needed someone to say my name when the room was listening, but no one would. So I stopped waiting. The quarterly strategy meeting felt different. There was tension in the air, excitement masked as urgency. Mark stood at the front of the conference room like he was about to unveil a revolution. All right, team, he said. This next initiative is our big one. If we pull it off, we're not just streamlining operations. We're changing how we work as a company. Everyone leaned in. The project, a full platform migration with multiple departments involved, client touchpoints, external vendors, the kind of messy, career-defining storm people begged to lead. My pulse kicked up. This was it. This was the thing I had been preparing for, silently, all along. Then Mark clicked to the slide labeled Roles and Responsibilities. Jake, Lead Coordinator. Emma, Client Communications. Reed, Migration Timeline. Layla, Support and Documentation. Support and Documentation. Again. It was like déjà vu wrapped in a slap. I stared at the slide. The room buzzed as assignments were clarified. But my ears were ringing. I had already mapped the system dependencies for this transition. Had already outlined the communication gaps from the last failed rollout. Had already, privately, fixed 2 of the tools the rest of the team would be relying on. And once again, I wasn't in the room. I was asked to keep things organized. Mark smiled at me like this was a compliment. Layla's the glue here, he said to the team. She'll make sure no one drops the ball. Smiled back. But inside, that was the moment I snapped into focus. I wasn't just being overlooked. I was being managed into silence. On purpose. Because they didn't fear I couldn't handle leadership. They feared what would happen if I did. And from that moment on, I stopped waiting for their slides. I was going to take the project anyway. Quietly. Strategically. And when the dust cleared, they'd all be standing on a foundation I built while they weren't looking. That night I didn't go home right away. I sat at my desk long after the rest of the team had filtered out, the office dim except for the soft glow of desk lamps and the occasional flicker of Slack notifications. The roles and responsibilities slide was still open on my screen, and with every passing second, that quiet fury inside me solidified into something sharp. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't just how it goes. This was a pattern. Voice. And it had a name. So the next morning I asked Mark for a quick one-on-one. No calendar hold. No agenda. Just a hallway ask. Sure, he said, smiling in that same practiced way he always did when something uncomfortable was on the table. We sat in a small side room by the copy machine. He closed his laptop but didn't look up. Got to the point. I need to ask why I've been assigned documentation again. He blinked. What do you mean? You're great at that. Kept my tone even. I've led platform transitions before. I've built 3 of the internal tools that will be used in this migration. Jake has never even overseen a full deployment. Mark gave a little shrug, leaned back in his chair like he was settling into a teaching moment. Layla, you're not wrong. You're excellent. But leading a project like this, it requires a steadier hand. Someone who doesn't get too caught up in the weeds. You tend to internalize things. Emotionally. You take things personally. That's not always a fit for high-stress leadership. There it was, wrapped in compliments, delivered with concern, laced with poison. He just told me, plain as day. My competence made him uncomfortable because it didn't come in the shape he was used to. I sat there for a moment, let the silence breathe. Thanks for the clarity, I said like I had before. But this time I didn't mean it. I walked out, closed the door gently behind me, and opened a brand new spreadsheet. Operation Takeover had just begun. That weekend I crashed hard. I didn't open my laptop. Didn't answer Slack. Didn't check the team dashboard like I usually did on Sunday nights. Instead, I lay on the floor of my living room. Phone flipped screen down on the carpet. Staring at the ceiling and wondering if I was losing my mind. 'Cause this slow erosion of confidence. This ache in my chest that I was trying to ignore. It didn't start with Mark. Started years ago. Every time I smiled through being interrupted. Every time I worked twice as hard for half the recognition. Every time I was called organized instead of brilliant, helpful instead of visionary, reliable instead of necessary. Adds up. And now here I was, knowing I was more qualified, more prepared, and more trusted by the team than half the people in leadership, and still somehow doubting myself. Maybe I was too much. Maybe I was difficult. Maybe they were right. That voice in my head was loud that night. The one trained by years of subtle bias to be grateful for what I'm given. But underneath it something else stirred. Not rage. Resolve. Because I knew what would happen if I left. They'd sigh in relief. Say, shame, she was really talented. Then replace me with someone less threatening. And I would have taught them nothing. Changed nothing. Proven nothing. Except that I could be pushed out like every woman who dared to ask for more. So I got up, made tea, sat at my desk, and opened my own version of the project tracker. It wouldn't have my name on it. Not yet. But it would have my fingerprints on every part of it. Quietly, methodically, and with the kind of strategy they'd never see coming. Because if they wanted me to play small, they should have picked someone else. Monday morning I showed up early. Not because I had anything to prove, but because I needed space. Before the buzz of Slack pings, before Mark started pacing behind people's desks like he was checking for loyalty. I opened my laptop, pulled up the team's shared drive, and quietly created a folder no one asked for. Inside, one doc for task alignment, one for risk assessment, a skeleton timeline that matched what we should be following, if anyone was actually paying attention. No logos, no signatures, no formatting. Just the bones of a project structure built by someone who'd actually done this before. Then I went to the project tracker, the one Jake was supposed to be running, and started cleaning it up. Tasks were missing. Dependencies weren't mapped. 2 deadlines were already overlapping and no one noticed. I didn't delete anything. Didn't change ownership. I just left quiet breadcrumbs. Comments in the margins. Conditional formatting to flag issues. Suggested edits in places Jake wouldn't know how to explain, but would absolutely copy. And then I did something bold. I stopped waiting for permission to speak. In our next stand-up, when Jake stumbled through his timeline update, I jumped in. Not aggressively, not loudly. Just clearly. We're actually seeing a lag between vendor handoff and QA. I've drafted a fix. It's in the comments of the tracker if anyone wants to take a look. There was a pause. Then someone said, "Oh yeah, that would definitely help." Jake didn't argue. Mark didn't push back. And just like that, my voice entered the current. Not as a guest, but as part of the flow. That was the moment I knew. I didn't need their title, head reach, and I was about to use it. They still called me the support role on paper. Still gave Jake the speaking slots, the credit lines, the introductions in client calls. But inside the machine, it was all me. Started slowly. A developer couldn't find the latest API schema, so I built a centralized resource library and quietly shared the link. A vendor misread the timeline, so I sent a clarifying email with revised deliverables, seeing the right people without stepping on toes. A bug in the QA environment nearly caused a delay, so I flagged it, documented it, and sent the fix before anyone asked. Every time something cracked, I was already there with the glue, and not just patching things, rebuilding them. Processes, workflows, trust. The team didn't announce it, but slowly they started looping me in first. "Hey Layla, quick gut check, does this make sense? Can you sanity check this brief before I send it? I know Jake said X, but honestly, what's your take?" It wasn't formal authority. It was earned authority. The kind you can't fake. The kind that shows up when people are tired of mess and looking for clarity. And I gave it, quietly, consistently. Mark still thought Jake was running the project. Jake still thought I was helping him polish the details. But deep down, even they were starting to feel it. The way decisions started shifting toward me. The way tension dropped when I entered a call. The way momentum snapped back into place after I weighed in. I wasn't pushing anyone aside. I was just filling in the gaps. And eventually, the gaps led all the way to the top. 3 weeks into the project, something shifted. The milestones we were supposed to hit. We hit them barely. But not because the timeline made sense. Not because Jake was managing deliverables. We hit them because I was behind the curtain, patching, redirecting, and reworking the plan in real time. One Friday, the QA team flagged a dependency issue that could have delayed client testing by 4 to 5 days. Jake panicked, started messaging Mark in all caps. Mark told him to loop in Layla for logistics. But by the time they reached me, I'd already resequenced the pipeline, redistributed the testing order, and updated the comms plan. Result: 0 delay. No applause. No shout-out. Just a Slack message from Mark. "Thanks, Layla. As always, lifesaver." And it wasn't just the QA issue. When our third-party vendor missed a data migration window, I stepped in. Created a workaround using archived snapshots from our internal sandbox. Saved the data, the demo, and honestly the entire client relationship. Jake presented it to leadership like he coordinated the fix. I said nothing. Because the win wasn't his words. It was my fingerprints. Every time a client praised our clarity, that was my briefing. Every time leadership nodded at our reduced error rate, that was my QA matrix, written at midnight. Every time they talked about momentum, that was me pushing the boulder uphill alone. And I could have called it out, pulled the curtain, exposed the mismatch between visibility and value. But I didn't. Not yet. Because I was building something bigger than a moment. I was building proof. And when the time came, they wouldn't just hear my name. They'd realize I'd been running it all along. It didn't happen with fanfare. No big aha moment. No team-wide announcement. Just a series of quiet pivots. Until one day I realized something. Everyone was coming to me first. Emma, the front-end lead, stopped waiting on direction from Jake. She DM'd me directly. "Hey, just want to make sure the timeline still lines up with back-end changes. Can you confirm?" Reed, who used to parrot whatever Jake said in meetings, now tagged me in every Asana thread. "Layla, let us know if this aligns with the full scope before we commit." Even the vendors, who originally funneled questions through Jake, began saying me on everything. And not because I asked, but because I answered. Quickly, clearly, with no ego, no delay, no second guessing. Because I knew what I was doing. And more importantly, they knew it too. I wasn't loud about it. Didn't mark my name in bold or drop hints about owning the room. I just kept showing up with clarity. And in return, people started looking to me not just for solutions, but for direction. That's the thing they never tell you about leadership. It's not about being the loudest in the room. It's about being the person who makes the room move. And I was making it move. One answer, one rescue, one fix at a time. Jake still thought he was in charge. Mark still thought I was helping out. But slowly, subtly, I had become the anchor in a team drifting without leadership. And the others, they weren't waiting for official titles. They were already following me. I spent an entire Wednesday night cross-referencing inputs across teams, redlined the mismatches, built a diagnostic sheet no one asked for, just so I could see the whole system clearly. And there it was, a silent ticking error. If left unchecked, it would have corrupted thousands of migrated records. No rollback plan. No data hygiene backups in place. It would have blindsided QA and left us in a storm of blame. Fixed it. Not by calling an emergency meeting. Not by flagging it dramatically in Slack. I just looped in the devs directly. Wrote a note. Noticed a schema mismatch between client field under 01 and internal map under 12. Adjusted mappings to maintain relational integrity. Please confirm. 3 thumbs up emojis and 1 legend later. The problem disappeared like it had never existed. No one asked who caught it. Jake sent out his Friday progress update with a chart full of green checks. Mark forwarded it to leadership with a comment. Team is humming along. Love to see it. And you know what? I didn't even flinch. Because I wasn't there for the credit anymore. I was there for the control. Every time I prevented a breakdown, patched a hole, cleaned a mess before it could be seen, I was cementing the truth beneath their story. They might have had the title, but I had the grip. And eventually, grip becomes gravity, the kind people start to feel. Even if they can't quite explain why everything holds together when you're around. Mark always had a knack for noticing momentum, just not the source. One Monday morning about 6 weeks into the project, he stopped by my desk with a cup of coffee and a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. I've been hearing great things, Layla. The team's really clicking. That checklist for the audit. Brilliant stuff. You've got a real gift for keeping the trains running. Trains. Not the map. Not the destination. Just the trains. I thanked him politely. Smile. But something in me knew. He didn't see it yet. He saw smoother meetings, fewer crises, faster execution. But in his mind, Jake was still driving the bus. I was just greasing the wheels. It didn't matter that I had outlined the recovery plan when the vendor dropped off the radar. Or that I had rewritten the handoff process to avoid another delay. Or that I had quietly coached Jake through his last presentation so he didn't freeze again. Mark saw improvement. He just didn't understand the source. To him, leadership was still shaped like Jake. Loud, presentational, visionary. I was logistical, reliable, not threatening enough to elevate, but too essential to ignore. That's why, in the next team meeting, when Jake forgot to mention a major timeline update, Mark laughed and turned to me. Layla probably has it logged somewhere. She's the brain behind the operation. It was meant to be a compliment. The room chuckled, smiled. But deep down I knew what it meant. He saw the results. He just didn't see the leadership. Not yet. But that was okay. Because I was done asking to be seen. I was building something bigger than visibility. I was building inevitability. It was a Thursday. Not a big moment, not a high-stakes meeting. Just our weekly project sync with a few department heads and one of the VPs dialing in from another office. Jake was giving his usual summary, reading from the same template I had revised the night before, when something strange happened. He paused mid-sentence, glanced at me, then said, Actually, Layla reorganized this part of the deployment timeline. Cut about 3 days off the vendor cycle. Huge help. Just like that. Name. Loud. In the room. It landed softly like someone opening a window. People nodded. A few turned toward me. The VP raised her eyebrows and smiled. I gave the smallest nod. Said, happy to help. And kept my face neutral. But inside, something cracked loose. It wasn't the compliment. I didn't need Jake's permission to know what I'd built. It was the fact that he said it. That it finally became undeniable enough that even he couldn't hold it. That's how these systems work. They don't give you power. They slowly acknowledge it. After it's already become too obvious to ignore. That day, 2 more people looped me into conversations I normally wouldn't be invited to. Someone pinged me directly instead of going through Jake. And the VP. She emailed me after the call and said, "Loved your approach to the vendor sequence. Would you be open to syncing with my team on a separate project next week?" It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't a promotion. But it was the first crack in the wall. And I didn't kick it down. I wore it down. With clarity. With competence. With the kind of consistency that builds earthquakes beneath their polished floors. The next Monday, Mark swung by my desk with a smile that meant trouble. "Hey Layla," he said, trying too hard to sound casual. "Small thing. We need someone to clean up the internal client dashboard. Just temporarily. It's a mess, but I figured you're great with structure. Think you can take a look?" I raised an eyebrow. I knew the dashboard. Everyone did. It was the part of the project no one wanted to touch. Bloated, half-documented, built across 3 tools with no real owner. It had been patched together over 2 years by interns and short-term contractors. A black hole for accountability. And now they wanted me on it. This wasn't an opportunity. This was a test. Let's give the woman who's good with details the ugliest piece of the project and see if she can survive it. I could feel the setup baked into Mark's phrasing. Just temporarily. Small thing. Like if I failed they could shrug it off. And if I succeeded, well, they'd say it was just me doing what I do best. I stared at the dashboard. It was worse than I thought. Outdated metrics. Broken filters. No version control. Client users accessing the wrong panels. This was a lawsuit waiting to happen. Jake didn't want it. No one did. And that's exactly why I took it. "Sure," I said. "I'll own it. Not clean it. Own it." I didn't ask for help. Didn't ask what the last person did. I dug in. Mapped the user flows. Interviewed internal teams who hadn't been contacted in months. Rebuilt the tagging architecture from scratch. Created a new permissions protocol that would pass security compliance without blinking. And then I relaunched the dashboard live. Polished. Functional. Bulletproof. The client sent a thank you email to leadership. The analytics team adopted my structure for their own. Mark didn't say much. But the next day, the temporary note next to my name on the internal tracker? I didn't just fix the dashboard. I rebuilt its bones. They gave it to me like it was a cleanup job. A good luck task with no roadmap and no credit baked in. But I treated it like a product. User experience, data flow, accessibility, cross-platform compatibility. I applied the same standard I would have if my name were going to be on the launch email. And guess what? By the time I was done, everyone was using it. The sales team adopted it as their new reporting interface. The client account leads pulled real-time status updates from it. Even the executive team started referencing it in weekly check-ins, calling it the most intuitive internal tool we've had in years. They didn't know I had built it from a graveyard of disconnected files and spreadsheet scraps. They just knew it worked. Jake tried to claim partial credit in a Slack thread. Big shout out to Layla for executing the dashboard updates. Great team effort. Team effort. He hadn't touched a line of it. So I replied calmly, "Thanks, Jake." For clarity, I independently rebuilt the dashboard architecture, user filters, and permission system. Happy to walk through it with anyone who wants to scale it for their teams. No emojis. No passive phrasing. Just truth. The silence in that thread was loud. A few minutes later, one of the product VPs DM'd me directly. This dashboard is exceptional. You leading any other internal tools we should know about. And just like that, the narrative shifted. No more she's helpful. Now it was, she builds. The difference was subtle, but I felt it everywhere. People didn't just rely on me now. They followed. And Mark. He still hadn't said it out loud. But I could see it in the way he paused before assigning anything else. Like he'd just realized. He might have handed the wrong person the wrong task. And accidentally made her indispensable. After the dashboard release, the room shifted. Not physically. Not publicly. But something in the air changed. People started looking at me first. In meetings, when a question came up and Jake stalled with his usual, "We'll circle back on that," eyes drifted to me. Not with pressure. With expectation. Because the team already knew. If Layla speaks, we move forward. It began subtly. Emma, our front-end dev, stopped checking with Jake before launching tasks. She messaged me directly. "This flow okay with the client handoff doc? Want your eyes on it before we commit." Reed, the same guy who used to only speak in Mark's presence, started looping me in on documentation before it even hit staging. Even QA, normally siloed, asked me to confirm feature behaviors that were technically under Jake's scope. I hadn't asked for the authority. I had earned the trust. And trust moves faster than titles. At one point, I noticed people copying the dashboard color scheme into their own templates. That wasn't about design. That was code for, "We want the stability you created." And what was Mark doing? Butching. Self-aware. Unwilling to say it out loud because to admit it was to admit the system had failed. That the quiet woman he assigned to calendar invites was now running the project under his nose. The irony. Jake still led the stand-ups. Still posted in the project's Slack channel like he was giving marching orders. But even he knew the truth. I saw it in his eyes. The way he'd glance at me after every update. As if checking to see if he'd said the right thing. Because if he didn't, I was the one the team would actually follow. It happened on a Tuesday. Mid-afternoon. Right between back-to-back syncs and a half-drunk cup of coffee still cooling beside my keyboard. The client's legal team sent an email, flagging a data discrepancy in the compliance logs. Not a small one. Glaring one. The kind that gets escalated to procurement. The kind that makes VPs ask questions. The kind that lives in screenshots. And could derail the entire project if mishandled. Jake didn't see the email. Mark was in a vendor review off-site. By the time I opened it, the thread was 7 emails deep. Confusion. Frustration. Legalese. And a subject line that ended with, "Urgent. Immediate action required." Took a breath. Clicked into the dashboard backend. Ran a diff on the compliance log generation dates versus the client export schedule. And there it was. An outdated data filter was pulling archived values. Not live system activity. Not malicious. Not even a bug. Just a lazy leftover from the last release. Something no one had documented because no one owned it. No one, except me now. Open Slack. No noise from leadership. No messages from Jake. And that's when I realized. No one was coming. Could wait. Escalate. Cover. Or I could act. So I did. Pulled a timestamped correction file. Wrote a 2-paragraph explanation for the client that was clear, honest, and actionable. Built a new data validation rule. Pushed live in under an hour. Looped in legal with the exact sequence and fix. Then wrote the follow-up myself. "Hi all, please see the attached corrected logs and root cause breakdown. This issue has been resolved, and new compliance safeguards are now in place. Feel free to reach out with any questions. Layla." No delay. No panic. No mess. And within 15 minutes, the client responded. "Thank you for the fast and professional response. We're all good here." No one even noticed Mark was missing. Jake never even replied to the thread. But the rest of the team. They knew exactly what had happened. And they knew exactly who kept the project from going up in flames. The next morning, the energy in the office was different. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just quiet respect. Slack was unusually still. People glanced at me in the hallway, then quickly looked away like they weren't sure if they should say something or just let it breathe. Because yesterday, when everything went sideways, it wasn't Jake who saved the project. It wasn't Mark. It was me. And now everyone knew it. Later that day, Mark called an emergency project meeting. The client wanted a full timeline update, a walkthrough of all mitigation efforts, and a revised rollout strategy by end of week. Jake looked pale, kept fiddling with his pen. Mark paced a little before we even sat down, repeating, "We just need to get aligned." But when the meeting started, nobody looked at them. They looked at me. And this time, I didn't wait. I stood, walked to the whiteboard, grabbed a marker, and said calmly, "Okay, here's where we actually are. Let's walk through it together." No one questioned it. Not Jake, not Mark, not the client rep who had dialed in. I mapped the timeline, outlined the fix, proposed a safeguard system that could prevent any future log discrepancies, and assigned next steps before Mark even said a word. And when I finished, there was a pause. Long one. Then Emma said, "Can Layla just lead the rest of this phase?" Mark hesitated, then nodded. Just like that. There was no announcement, no title change, no parade. But in that room, the handoff happened, and everyone felt it. Because sometimes leadership doesn't arrive with a crown. Sometimes it steps forward with a marker, draws the line and says, "Let's get to work." The crisis passed. But the ripple didn't. By Thursday, I wasn't just running timelines. I was running meetings, even ones Mark was in. He started showing up late, offering vague, just wanted to observe excuses, and sitting in the corner like a guest in his own project. Jake, quiet, almost too quiet. I think he realized the room no longer needed him to translate. Because now, people were asking me directly, "Layla, does this scope still align with the new migration window? Can you approve this release sequence? Want us to route questions through you or straight to the client? Not should we, but do we?" As if I was already the final say. And maybe I was. The funny thing about power is, when it shifts, really shifts. Doesn't ask for your permission. Just starts moving around you. By the end of the week, I had synced with the finance team, worked directly with the client's audit liaison, and rebuilt 2 internal tools that used to be split across departments. Not because I asked to, because everyone else just deferred. And Mark, he sent me a message Friday morning. "You've been really stepping up this week. Appreciate the extra effort." Extra effort. I read it twice, then closed the message without responding. Because this wasn't extra. This was what leadership looks like. When no one gives it to you. So you take it, build it, and carry it anyway. And the team. They didn't need a memo. They had already made their decision. By the following week, the tension started creeping back in. But it didn't come from the team. Came from the top. Mark started chiming in more during meetings again, suddenly reinterpreting decisions that had already been made. "Let's make sure we're aligned with the original scope," he'd say after I'd just finished guiding the team through a revised rollout that was already mid-execution. Jake tried to. He dropped back into the group's Slack thread like nothing had changed. "Hey team. Quick reminder to follow the original status update format going forward. Let's keep it clean." But people didn't reply. They pinged me in DMs asking, "Do we actually need to change this? Thought we were using your new dashboard. What should I really be prioritizing, Layla?" It was subtle. Mark and Jake were still in charge by title, still CC'd, still included. But the center of gravity had shifted. And everyone felt it. The old leads weren't leading anymore. They were chasing authority they no longer held. There's a kind of silence that follows failed power. And it was all over them now. The only one who didn't seem surprised was me. Because I knew what they didn't. Real leadership isn't something you announce. Something people choose. And the team had already chosen. Mark started reasserting with small power moves, reviewing my timelines after they'd already been approved, rephrasing my notes in recaps. Jake started asking leading questions in meetings, trying to imply uncertainty in my calls. But no one backed them. No one bit. Because the project wasn't going fine anymore. It was thriving. And they knew exactly why. Not because of the system. Not because of the titles. Because someone finally stepped up and said, "Let's stop pretending we're fine and actually fix this." It started with an unexpected calendar invite. Subject line: Platform Project. Executive Sync. From Maya Patel, Senior VP of Product. Blinked. Maya. She was 3 floors above our org chart, 2 time zones away, rarely involved unless a project made waves. The invite had 5 people on it. Mark. 2 client-side execs. Me. Not CC'd. Not optional. Present. I joined the call early. Checked my mic twice. Heart steady. Not from nerves but from clarity. I knew what this was. They weren't just syncing. They were watching. 10 minutes in, Maya turned directly to me after Jake fumbled a summary. "Layla, I've been reviewing the dashboards you rebuilt. That structure is the cleanest client-facing system we've seen this quarter." He nodded. "Glad it's working well. We designed it around real client needs, not just what the legacy tools allowed." She smiled. "Exactly. And the rollout recovery last week. That response turned a potential escalation into a trust-building moment." Mark leaned forward, trying to insert himself. "Yes, the team's been operating at a high level lately. We've all been pushing hard." But Maya cut in. "I'm aware. What I'm not clear on is why the project tracker still lists Jake as the primary lead when every major turnaround has come from Layla's desk." Silence. Just for a moment. Then Maya continued. "We're doing a broader leadership review next month. Layla, I'd like you to prepare a formal walkthrough of your workflows, dashboard logic, and decision chain for internal presentation. We need more people building like this." I said. "Absolutely." Mark stared at the screen like it had betrayed him. Jake didn't speak for the rest of the call. I wasn't just visible now. I was undeniable. And the people who had tried to box me in were watching the walls fall away. 2 days after the executive sync, I got another calendar invite. Private. No subject line this time. Just, "Check in Maya Patel." We met over video. She was direct. "Layla, I'll keep this simple. You're already running the show. Let's make it official." I said nothing at first. Because part of me, the part they tried to shrink, was still waiting for the catch. But there wasn't one. "We're restructuring the org chart," she continued. "This platform rollout proved what good leadership looks like under pressure. And it's not who had the title. It's who held the line." I paused. "You held the line." And just like that, the offer was on the table. Interim project director for the remainder of the implementation. With full authority. Direct line to product leadership. Budget sign-off power. Team autonomy. Everything I had already been doing. But now, with the weight to make it permanent. Thanked her. Then said something I hadn't planned. "Before I say yes, I want one thing clarified. This can't be performative. I won't lead while someone else gets credit in a room I'm not invited to." Maya smiled. "That's exactly why I want you leading. You don't ask for power. You assume responsibility." So I accepted. Not because I needed the title to know who I was. But because the team deserved a leader whose authority matched their trust. And me. I deserved to stop hiding behind support. When I'd been carrying the weight of the outcome all along. That afternoon the updated org chart went live. For the first time next to the project's name. Led, Layla Hassan. No footnotes. No acting as. No behind-the-scenes glue. Just leadership. Earned. Visible. The first thing I did with the new title. I pulled up the onboarding workflow. Because I remembered exactly what it felt like. To walk in, be praised for my organization. then quietly handed the invisible work no one else wanted. I couldn't undo what had happened to me, but I could make damn sure it didn't happen again. So I rewrote the playbook. I split support tasks across roles, no more defaulting to the woman in the room. Created a rotating schedule for note-taking and admin tasks in meetings. Implemented a visibility tracker that logged who owned what, and who actually delivered. Then I started one-on-ones with the new hires. Every analyst, every associate, not just to check in but to listen, because that was what no one ever did for me. And when I spotted the same patterns, smart, capable women being pushed toward the glue, while their male counterparts got to present and pitch, I stepped in early. Nope, I'd say in meetings. Let's have Sam run this sprint, she built it. Actually, Jess caught that issue last week. Let her walk us through the fix. First, people looked surprised. Then they got used to it. Then they respected it. Because visibility became part of the process, not the exception. And the women, they didn't shrink anymore. They spoke with both hands on the table. With receipts, context, and confidence because now the system backed them. One afternoon after a call, Emma stopped me in the hallway. You know, she said, the first week I got here I was ready to quit. I thought it'd be the same old story. But watching you lead, that changed everything. Smiled. 'Cause that was the point. They had tried to keep me in the background. So now, I was making the spotlight permanent. Not just for me. For every woman who comes next. It happened in the most predictable way imaginable. Mark sent an email. Object. Platform success. Reflections and gratitude. It was addressed to leadership, CC'd to the full team, and oozed with performative sincerity. Just wanted to take a moment to reflect on what a journey this project has been, he wrote. So proud of how far we've come as a team. I've watched many of you grow, but one standout in particular is Layla, who really blossomed into a leadership role. Her growth has been amazing to watch. Thrilled to have played a part in her development. Her growth, blossomed, played a part, like I was some intern he mentored into usefulness. I stared at the screen for a moment, composed. Then I hit reply all. Appreciate the kind words, Mark. Just to clarify for anyone newer to the thread, my leadership on this project wasn't the result of a growth opportunity. It was the result of stepping in to prevent a collapse. Ownership began the moment decisions stopped being made and deliverables stopped moving. Credit belongs to every member of the team who chose to follow results, not titles. Glad we're all aligned now. Send. I didn't wait for a response. Didn't need one. The thread went silent. But the Slack DMs lit up. Clapping hands. That was perfect. You said what we all wanted to. Thank you for making it plain. Mark never replied. He didn't have to. Because he finally understood what I had known for weeks. The narrative no longer belonged to him. And neither did the team. You don't get to ignore someone until their work saves your reputation. Then frame it like you helped them grow. Because I didn't grow under him. I grew despite him. And now that I had the mic, I wasn't giving it back. It was time to close the loop. The project had launched, on time, under budget, and with one of the highest client satisfaction scores our team had ever seen. Naturally, leadership wanted a wrap-up report. Mark offered to draft it. Jake volunteered to summarize the journey. But I knew what that meant. Another glossy, vague narrative that bent the facts just enough to protect egos and preserve hierarchy. Another quiet erasure. So I offered instead. I'll take the lead on the project recap. I have the cleanest visibility across the deliverables. Mark paused, then nodded. That night I didn't just write a recap. I wrote a record. Here's how I structured it, and why every line mattered. 1. Clear, chronological overview. I opened with a factual timeline. Milestones, timelines, pivots, anchored with specific dates. No fluff. Why? A neutral timeline sets the foundation. It makes room for acknowledgement without editorializing. March 12th. Initial scoping meeting. March 18th. Vendor integration begins. March 27th. First data issue flagged and resolved. April 3rd. Audit window updated and executed within 6 hours. 2. Transparent role attribution. I named every key contributor by task, not just by title. I listed what they did and when they did it. Why? Contribution matters more than rank. This flips the script and shows leadership who did the work, not who had the role. Compliance safeguards were implemented by Emma Reyes, QA, with dashboard corrections managed end-to-end by Layla Hassan, project director. 3. Behind-the-scenes wins. I highlighted invisible labor, off-hours fixes, risk prevention, vendor management, that rarely gets tracked. Why? These moments are leadership. They're where respect is earned. Naming them ensures they don't disappear. When a data pipeline delay threatened the UAT cycle, adjustments were made proactively by Reed Park and validated within the hour by back-end devs. These fixes prevented a full test rollback. 4. Final reflection and quiet truth. In the closing section, I acknowledged what leadership didn't see. The gap between what was delegated and what was actually done. I didn't name names. I didn't shame anyone. But I left a sentence that said everything. This project's success is a testament to what happens when execution is trusted, not assumed, when the person doing the work is finally allowed to lead it. I hit send. Object. Final project debrief. Direct ownership summary. No one edited it. No one added notes. Because for the first time, there was nothing left to clarify. The record had been written. Not in whispers. Not in Slack threads. But in ink. And it was mine. A week after the project closed, I was in the break room grabbing tea when I felt it. That brief pause in a hallway conversation. The hush that comes not from awkwardness, but awareness. 2 junior analysts stood near the counter. New hires, bright, driven, fresh out of grad school. I remembered seeing them in the back rows of meetings. Quiet, eyes wide, writing everything down like their futures depended on it. When I turned, one of them, Mira, smiled nervously. The other nudged her gently. Mira cleared her throat. Sorry, this might sound random, but... Your wrap-up email? I saved it. And blinked. I've never seen someone actually break down who did what before, she continued. It made me feel like the work I do now could actually matter later. Her voice was small, but her eyes were full. That kind of full that comes from holding something in for too long. Smiled gently. It does matter. Just don't let them talk you into thinking it doesn't. She nodded, then added. When you ran that last meeting, the one where Mark just sat there and didn't say anything, I swear half the room exhaled. I didn't laugh. I didn't gloat. I just looked at her and said, then next time you speak, make sure they hear you. And if they don't, keep building anyway. Eventually they'll have to follow. Because I remembered what it felt like. To look for someone ahead of me and not see anyone. To wonder if I was crazy for feeling invisible. But now, I wasn't the one looking. I was the one being looked at. And that shift, from surviving to signaling, that's what power really is. Not a title, not a moment, not even recognition. Just the quiet, lasting proof that if you lead loudly enough with your actions, someone else might not have to beg to be heard at all. Here's what I've learned. They didn't give me the easy tasks because I wasn't ready. They gave me the easy tasks because they were scared of what would happen if I took the hard ones and nailed them. They told me I was organized, reliable, great with details. What they meant was, you're easier to manage when you stay small. But here's the thing about small work. When you do it well enough, long enough, with sharp enough precision, it becomes infrastructure. And when the structure starts to buckle, they don't look to the loudest voice. They look to the one who's been holding it the whole time. That's who I became. Not by shouting, not by demanding, but by building. Everywhere they thought no one was watching. And when they finally noticed, It wasn't because I changed. It was because they had run out of excuses. So to every woman who's ever been handed supporting work, boxed into soft skills, or told to be patient, your time will come. I'm here to tell you, you don't need to wait your turn. You can take the pen and write the damn story yourself. And when they try to edit it, we'll correct them and send it back in bold. 'Cause that's what I did. I took the scraps they gave me and built a system so strong, they had no choice but to stand on it. So the next time someone tries to hand you the easy tasks, ask yourself this: what would happen if you used them to take over everything? 'Cause I did. And I'm not giving it back.